People need to understand something very clearly, and they need to understand it without brushing off the details as simple celebrity gossip or internet drama. When information starts leaking slowly, when it trickles in piece by piece instead of dropping all at once, it almost always signals that the situation in question runs far deeper than anyone initially assumed. We are currently watching something unfold involving Claressa Shields, Papoose, and Remy Ma, and the longer it plays out, the harder it becomes to pretend it's all harmless misunderstanding or confusion. At this point, the red flags are practically punching through the surface, and the warning signs are too loud for anyone to ignore. What began as whispers and speculation has now grown into an uncomfortable public unraveling that raises serious questions about intentions, loyalty, and emotional vulnerability. In the past few days, new photos surfaced showing Papoose and Remy Ma together inside a store. What caught people's attention wasn't just that they were in the same location at the same time, but that the images captured them in direct proximity, standing closely, interacting normally, without a hint of secrecy or discomfort. Reports quickly followed claiming that Papoose purchased Remy a fur coat during that same outing, and those photos immediately scattered across the internet. The reaction was swift and unified. People began to ask whether this was an accident or something deliberately allowed to happen. When someone knows that cameras are present, knows that photos are being taken, and still moves without caution, it suggests a level of confidence or a lack of concern that speaks volumes. That is what sparked the real conversation. Not the fur coat itself, not the shopping trip, but the messaging behind the act of letting those images exist at all. Many observers questioned whether Papoose actually intended for the situation to be seen, because if someone is deeply invested in protecting a new relationship or shielding someone new from emotional blowback, then images like that would never have been casually permitted, let alone allowed to circulate. When a person willingly hands the public visual confirmation of an ongoing connection to a spouse while simultaneously entertaining involvement with someone else, it suggests that protecting feelings may not be a priority. And that is what leads people to wonder whether Claressa is being treated recklessly, misled, or positioned in a dynamic she does not fully understand. It's important to state clearly that none of this analysis is rooted in trying to belittle Claressa Shields or attack her character. In fact, the concern exists precisely because people admire her. Watching someone walk into a situation that appears unhealthy, unbalanced, or manipulative without anyone offering honesty would be irresponsible. Silence is not compassion when someone is being pushed toward emotional harm. If you have a platform and you see someone stepping into danger, staying quiet isn't kindness, it's neglect. To add context, one cannot discuss the current situation without acknowledging the depth of the history between Remy Ma and Papoose. These are not two individuals who shared a brief romance or impulsive fling. They share years of life, a marriage, a child, and memories that cannot be erased simply because circumstances became complicated. A bond built through marriages, incarcerations, setbacks, and victories does not evaporate overnight. And for anyone stepping into that space, especially someone younger, ambitious, and still building their own life, the reality should be taken seriously. Relationships that exist after long marriages are rarely simple, and they certainly don't move at the pace outsiders expect. These complications were further intensified by rumors that divorce papers were filed and later withdrawn. Those whispers were followed by something even more telling. Remy Ma began wearing her wedding rings again. That detail did not go unnoticed, because people do not casually place wedding rings back on their fingers without meaning behind it. Rings symbolize status, intention, and position. Reintroducing them publicly was a form of silent communication. Remy didn't need to make a statement because the visual did the work. She also spoke publicly about co-parenting, praising how responsive Papoose is when she reaches out. Those comments raised eyebrows because they suggested ongoing involvement, not separation. And crucially, those statements surfaced at a time when Claressa seemed to believe her position with Papoose was secure. That timing did not feel accidental to many of the people watching. Meanwhile, Claressa appears to be giving more to the situation than she's receiving. She is young, talented, decorated in her sport, and built her success through relentless discipline. Yet right now, her focus seems divided. Instead of pouring fully into her career and solidifying her legacy, she appears emotionally invested in someone whose life remains entangled in commitments that predate her. And that imbalance is where people start getting uneasy. A lot of individuals, especially driven ones, get knocked off course when they allow relationships to consume more energy than they can afford. They isolate, cut off support systems, justify behavior that hurts them, and sacrifice their own stability for someone else's comfort. It's a pattern that is not rare, but is always dangerous. What makes this entire situation harder to witness is the growing perception that Claressa is defending someone who may not be offering her full transparency in return. While she argues publicly, claps back at critics, and distances herself from people who genuinely care about her, Papoose still has full access to his wife, his child, and the family life he built long before Claressa ever entered the picture. That dichotomy alone speaks volumes. There are also claims that he has keys to Claressa's home, yet has not moved in fully. When someone professes deep love yet refuses to step completely into the commitment, the hesitation is usually not random. Truly ready people do not stand with one foot inside and one foot outside the door. The holiday season amplified these concerns. Claressa reportedly spent Christmas alone shopping for herself. Papoose spent the same holiday with his wife and family. That is not rumor, the photos exist. And holidays matter because where someone chooses to spend them often reveals loyalty in ways words cannot. Choosing to be with one household over another speaks directly to priority and hierarchy, and in this case, the implications were hard to ignore. Some defended the situation by pointing out that Remy is still legally his wife, implying that technically nothing is out of bounds. But that argument reinforces the larger point. Marriage carries real weight. Getting involved with someone who is still legally and emotionally attached to another person often leads to heartbreak, because the paperwork matters. Divorce is not symbolic, it is structural. As long as someone maintains the legal title of spouse, you will never be first in line. Decisions will bypass you. Loyalty will split. Needs will be negotiated around someone else's existence. That isn't bitterness, that's logistics. Another layer involves finances and appearances. Reports suggest Claressa may be spending her own money to maintain the image of a thriving relationship, while the resources she brings to the table may be benefiting others behind the scenes. There is a stark difference between treating yourself and funding someone else's presentation. If a man gifts his wife a fur coat while handing his girlfriend travel luggage, the priority is unmistakable. Appearances don't lie. While all of this unfolds, Remy appears calm and strategic. She is not arguing online, she is not clapping back at critics, she is not chasing validation or reacting emotionally. She is observing. And stillness in situations like this often comes from someone who already knows where they stand. Claressa, by contrast, appears reactive, defending, explaining, and justifying, and that behavioral discrepancy is telling. Another concern involves family. Reports suggest Claressa has distanced herself from relatives during this relationship. She has allegedly had fallouts with people who previously stood firmly in her corner. That pattern is almost textbook in situations where emotional manipulation is present, even if it is not intentional or malicious. When someone gradually disconnects you from your support system, the eventual crash hits much harder because you no longer have people to soften the landing. Family is flawed, inconvenient, and sometimes chaotic, but more often than not, they're the people still standing when everyone else walks away. There is also the emotional dimension that many people relate to. Claressa seems to love deeply and intensely. People like that give everything: their energy, loyalty, protection, and trust. They do not love halfway, and when betrayal eventually shows up, the pain cuts sharply because the investment was wholehearted. Hearts like that deserve truth, not half commitments or power games. However, beneath the humor, there was a noticeable edge to her tone. The jokes were there, the laughter was real, but the frustration was not coming from the coats, the buttons, the hoods, or the Rolls-Royce in the corner of the room. Something else had shifted in the background, and soon enough, people figured out what it was. Around that same time, reports began circulating that Papoose and Remy Ma had stepped out together for New Year's Eve, dressed in their usual coordinated fur looks, moving with the same familiar energy the public had come to associate with them for years. It didn't read as co-parenting to most people. It read as something much more intimate, much more familiar, and much more intentional. Once photos and sightings started spreading across social media, viewers instantly recognized the symbolism. These were not two people silently raising a child behind the scenes or quietly handling responsibilities away from the spotlight. This was a public moment, shared in a way that looked polished, coordinated, and comfortable, the kind of comfort that does not usually happen between two people who are supposedly separated, moved on, or emotionally detached. What really struck people was how unchanged everything looked. The vibe, the body language, the styling, the event choice, it all felt like a continuation of a long-standing tradition rather than a new chapter. It created a wave of online reactions because it suggested that the story everyone thought they understood was not actually over. If you present yourself as part of a unit, especially on holidays, it sends a message that no amount of social media silence can cover. Holidays are markers. They are symbolic moments that reveal who people prioritize, who they are aligned with, and who they want standing next to them at the start of a new year. When a man chooses to spend major holidays with his wife, especially one he has a long public history with, while simultaneously appearing romantically tied to another woman, it creates confusion for everyone watching and chaos for the woman stuck outside the tradition. There's no clean version of that story. Someone will always end up feeling like they were misled. This is where Claressa's frustration made complete sense. Her reaction did not come from jealousy, insecurity, or a desire to stir up conflict. It came from exhaustion, the kind that builds quietly over time when you realize you have been placed in a situation you never signed up for. When Claressa spoke during her coat appointment, she wasn't attacking anyone or pleading for clarity. She wasn't asking the internet for validation or sympathy. She was simply existing, trying to enjoy her day, but the undercurrent of irritation was visible to anyone paying attention. It was the tone of someone who had already arrived at a conclusion, whether she said it out loud or not. The reason so many people empathized with her is because emotional fatigue is relatable. Anyone who has ever been in a relationship that hasn't truly closed its previous chapter understands what that silence feels like. When someone refuses to make a definitive choice, refuses to define boundaries, or refuses to be honest about the state of their previous commitments, it leaves the new person navigating a situation full of red flags they didn't create. There's nothing more frustrating than realizing that you are being treated as an addition to a story that never ended, a sequel nobody asked for, written by someone too afraid to finish the original plot. The internet did not hold back. Once the New Year's Eve footage circulated, Papoose became the center of the discussion and the criticism. Users across platforms accused him of trying to balance three public identities at the same time: the single man, the devoted husband, and the family man. On paper, each one can exist individually without conflict. In real life, trying to maintain all three at once creates confusion and inevitably hurts someone. It's not a sustainable structure, no matter how smooth someone is socially or how well they manage optics. Online commentary pointed out that sitting in the middle is not an act of maturity, it's an act of avoidance. It's what happens when someone doesn't want to let go of the comfort of their past or the validation of their present. But eventually, that avoidance becomes a form of dishonesty, and when it plays out publicly, it turns into content, which is exactly what happened here. Suddenly, the situation wasn't just personal, it was entertainment. People began analyzing the timelines, comparing appearances, reading body language, and questioning motives. It became a conversation about mixed signals, unspoken agreements, and emotional responsibility. The tricky part about this situation is how public it is. None of these conversations are happening quietly behind closed doors, and none of the emotions are protected by privacy. Every sighting becomes a headline, every outfit becomes symbolism, every caption becomes a clue, and every silence becomes an answer. For Claressa, that level of exposure turns what should be a private emotional experience into a shared spectacle. When the relationship you are navigating is also being dissected by strangers in real time, it creates a layer of humiliation that goes beyond heartbreak. It becomes embarrassing in a way that is difficult to articulate. The internet often treats these scenarios as harmless entertainment. Memes are made, jokes are shared, reactions are filmed, and people move on. But for the person living it, the consequences are real. The tension builds, the confusion deepens, the frustration grows. Love should not feel like a battle against unfinished business or a competition against history, and no one deserves to be positioned as an accessory to a relationship that refuses to resolve itself. The issue at the core of this story isn't about coats, Rolls-Royces, New Year's Eve, or even traditional gender expectations. The true conflict centers on closure. When one relationship ends without a clear boundary line, anyone who steps in afterwards is forced to deal with the aftermath. They become the emotional cleanup crew, whether they volunteered for that role or not. That dynamic creates resentment, not because the new partner is insecure, but because they are being asked to tolerate behavior that would normally be unacceptable.
Many people watching believe Claressa walked into something that was never fully resolved. The emotional ties between Remy and Papoose never looked severed, and their public appearances did not reflect a relationship that had ended. From the outside, it looked more like a paused marriage than a dissolved one. And when the past is only paused, the present cannot move freely. There is no space for new love to grow, no matter how strong the connection might be. Eventually, someone becomes tired of being patient. Someone becomes tired of waiting for clarity. Someone becomes tired of pretending ambiguity is harmless. What makes avoidance particularly messy is that it allows the person in the middle to benefit from both dynamics. They get the safety of the old relationship and the excitement of the new one without committing fully to either. It becomes a performance of commitment rather than the reality of commitment. But performances always fall apart eventually. At some point, decisions have to be made, not to please the audience, but to protect the dignity of the people involved. Choosing a direction does not guarantee happiness, it does not guarantee approval, but it does guarantee respect, and respect is what creates stability. When someone refuses to choose, they are not just avoiding conflict, they are actively creating it, and they are placing the entire burden of that conflict on the person least equipped to handle it, the new partner who entered the situation in good faith. This is why Claressa's coat shopping clip resonated deeply with viewers. The humor was there, the cross-fox explanation, the hood tests, the bag switch-ups, the accidental almost name reveals, all of it felt light and natural. But beneath the surface was someone who had reached a point where irritation turns into clarity. She did not need to argue, she did not need to expose, she did not need to plead. She simply looked tired. Sometimes, tired is the most honest emotion a person can show. In the end, this situation is not about fashion, luxury, or celebrity optics. It is about accountability. It is about emotional responsibility. It is about closure. And it is about the simple reality that relationships cannot grow when one foot is still planted in the past. Silence can look graceful at first, but eventually it begins to look like avoidance, and avoidance always carries a cost. If this relationship collapses, the healing process will not be easy. Public embarrassment, emotional loss, and shattered trust leave marks that even success cannot shield someone from. Strength in one part of life does not eliminate vulnerability in another. Right now, Claressa appears to be standing alone, and that is what makes this situation so hard for people to watch. Even the toy drive incident reflected the broader pattern. When Claressa removed a woman and her children from the event due to past disrespect, debate immediately broke out. Some argued Claressa should have ignored the history and helped the children regardless. Others defended her position, pointing out that charity does not require accepting disrespect or abuse. In reality, both things can be true. Kindness matters, and so do boundaries. People love to preach generosity, yet conveniently forget that being charitable does not obligate someone to allow access to individuals who publicly threatened them. Claressa has been mocked, pushed, and tested repeatedly. Reaching a breaking point does not make someone heartless, it makes them human. And that is what makes this entire situation so emotionally heavy. Claressa keeps giving, keeps defending, keeps sacrificing, while others benefit quietly in the background. Eventually, reality forces its way to the surface. What we are seeing right now does not feel like confusion, it feels like a slow unveiling. What happens next depends on whether Claressa decides to listen before the damage settles in. If this situation ends the way it is currently trending, she will need her family, she will need support, she will need people who love her without conditions. And tragically, those are the very individuals she seems to be shutting out.